the rest of Canada best listen. And I mean, Trudeau has been a dud for us. And I mean, always you can fake a little tear and you can say all the wonderful things, but when you see his lips moving, you know he's lying. He doesn't care.
I was at the Value of Alberta Conference over the weekend, and my takeaway, people are desperate for action and tired of all the talk. Saturday morning in Calgary, 750 people attended the Value of Alberta Conference, hosted by Alberta Proud and sponsored by the Buffalo Project, Modern Miracle Network, and our friends at Canadians for Democracy and Prosperity. The conference asked the question, does Alberta have viable options and a credible case to go it alone if necessary? The conference brought together people from across the spectrum, former politicians like Ted Morton, Danielle Smith, and Joe Oliver, as well as academic minds like Marco Navarogini and Jack Mintz. There was even a Quebec separatist, former Bloc MP Danielle Turp. And there were pro-Canadian advocates like entrepreneur Brett Wilson and former publishing mogul and author Conrad Black. The conference brought together people from all sides to lay out the case for Alberta's inequitable treatment in Confederation, from equalization to the demonization of our pipelines to the undoing of the work of Peter Lougheed to wrestle Alberta's resources from the hands of the federal government through the Liberals' new federal climate change regulations. During the day, I published a few articles at our Rebel website about the speeches of the panelists, and I included some remarks from prominent Indigenous leaders who were on a panel about how they are partners in the fight against the federal government for more Alberta autonomy. But after 9 hours of listening to how bad we really do have it here in Alberta, in some very tangible ways, like the $32,000 per minute flowing from Alberta into federal coffers, I wanted to know what the people in attendance thought the next steps are for Alberta and how we need to get there. The experts had their say, but what about the people? Just watch. You had people from both sides of the argument. You had some pro-federalist people here, some pro-independence people, but you also covered people from all walks of life. So you had Indigenous people here to speak about their relationship with Canada, as well as municipal folks to talk about municipal autonomy. Why did you cover such a broad swath?
Because we think that this issue, like I mentioned in my speech, it's nonpartisan and it needs to appeal to all Albertans.
William, you were a panelist today, and you said some things that might be controversial within conservative circles. Probably not for me, because I just believe in the government leaving everybody alone. But you made the case for I suppose conservative outreach to young people and dealing with the issues that matter to young people, even if old fogies like me don't think they do matter.
So I would say we're in a new political reality, and for many years, voter turnout amongst younger voters, those aged 18 to 35, was substantially below the voter turnout from other groups. It basically meant that that cohort of voters didn't have as much influence in determining the outcome of an election. Now we're seeing those groups of voters voting at the same level as other groups, people in their 40s and 50s. So that means we now have to take this issue very seriously if our goal is to win an election down the road.
What do you think should happen next? We heard a lot of talk today, but what do you think the solution is for the problems of Alberta?
I'm hoping there were not, in my opinion, there were not a lot of solutions given, but I am hoping that this information goes back to the UCP government. Jason Kenney gets this, and he understands where the majority of the people that are like-minded to him are heading. So I'm hoping that the provincial government does something with this.
I thought the conference was fabulous. I really believe we need to do something, and we need to do it fast, because the East doesn't care about the West.
I don't think it's hard to get the message that we really can't wait. There isn't time, and there's a lot of people hurting a lot, and the longer it goes on, the more destruction there's going to be, and the harder it's going to be to turn it around.
What do you think should happen next? referendum?
Well, I mean, that's going to happen, but maybe it can happen sooner. You know, there was some very good speakers today, and the rest of Canada best listen. And I mean, you know, Trudeau has been a dud for us. And I mean, always you can fake a little tear and you can say all the wonderful things, but when you see his lips moving, you know he's lying. He doesn't care.
The thing that we want to have happen is more action. We do need action, and unfortunately right now we're just squandering it away. So I think that everybody wants us to be getting a better deal in Canada, and that's what we're hoping for.
I hope a lot of people get to be exposed to what was presented here today.
What do you think should happen next to address the inequity of Alberta within Confederation?
You know, what we need to do is we need to develop a strong independent Alberta and a strong independent West. You know, we always talk about Alberta and Saskatchewan being together, and where BC fits is a bit of a mystery, but, you know, we need to develop a very strong independent Alberta for sure. And, you know, we don't need to separate. At this point, I think it needs to be a bargaining chip for our Prime Minister so that we can say that we're not happy with what's going on out here, because with the increase of the Wexit movement, etc., there's a definite movement for separation, but I'm not for separatism. We're United We Roll for Canada. We want the country to stay together, but we also need to be independent, and we need to, again, I mean, I've said it, it's almost a year now since the convoy, and I said so many of the same things that they said today is we need to get these pipelines built, we need to get Energy East going, and how many times do we have to talk about this with myself and Brent Wilson and so many important people out there that talk about what we have to do, yet here we are a complete year later after our frustration, and it's still not done.
I think, too, a lot of the things that happened in Alberta are now happening in BC. We see that with the Wet'suwet'en, where there's Tides-funded interlopers trying to disenfranchise the local First Nations. We heard from some First Nations leaders here. I guess, what is the message that British Columbia can take from the First Nations leaders that spoke here today?
I think that what the British Columbian government and the people of British Columbia need to take is that there's a lot of First Nations that are supportive of developing these projects, whether it's oil and gas or mining or any of these things. First Nations can be our partners in this. The majority of First Nations support projects like this. I know you mentioned Coastal GasLink. Every single elected band on that pipeline route has a sharing agreement with Coastal GasLink, and they support the project. So, you have all the elected bands on one side and 5 unelected hereditary chiefs on the other. So I think it's actually a pretty clear-cut situation, and I think most British Columbians kind of see the situation for what it is.
Some people think that means complete sovereignty, and for others it means greater autonomy and independence inside of Confederation. As my friend Prem Singh from Canadians for Democracy and Prosperity said in her speech, Alberta can't wait. The time for talk is over. But it still remains to be seen what Premier Jason Kenney is actually going to do about it. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Have you heard about our Rebel cruise? It's to Alaska. We leave July 4th. We come back July 11th to get all the details, to see the incredible lineup of speakers, and to see the boat itself. Just go to rebelnewscruise.com.